I do want to talk about the story with Trump and a $10 million bag of cash. I want to get to it in a second. But I also want to just ask you for a quick take on Tim Walz as the selection today from Kamala Harris.
Well, I'm not at all surprised that she chose him because there were problems with each of the other potential candidates. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who a lot of people favored, served in the IDF and has said there's no possibility of peace in the Middle East, and he hasn't accomplished much so far as governor. Had she picked Shapiro, there's a big chance she would have lost Michigan because the largest Muslim community in America is in Dearborn, and people would have probably just stayed home and not voted. Mark Kelly has some labor issues that were troublesome. And I think to some people, even though he's the same age as Kamala, he looked old because of his shaved head. By picking Walz, she has an absolute salt of the earth guy. You know, he grew up in a little tiny town where everybody knows everybody. He was a Army brat. He served 24 years in the National Guard. He as a member of Congress, was a Democrat representing a red district in the southern area of Minnesota, just above Iowa. And as governor, he's had a remarkable set of accomplishments. Free breakfast and lunch for all kids. Instead of, we're going to charge some people a little bit, they're all subsidized. Just give everybody a free lunch and breakfast and build it into the cost of it. Parental leave, lowering the cost of insulin before the federal government, and a number of other fundamental reforms. So
codified abortion rights in the state as well as legalizing marijuana.
And I would argue that picking the governor of Minnesota will have the effect of winning Michigan for the Democrats.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, the last thing on that is there's sort of a transactional aspect to this when you look at a Shapiro. He's popular. I mean, it's interesting that you cast him in a way that sort of does make you look twice at the potential controversies and how he could be the center of controversy, and that would be bad. But he does, have a certain popularity in Pennsylvania, and you do need Pennsylvania. But
as a former Pennsylvania resident, I'll tell you, and the people I know, that he's very popular. But he's still going to be out campaigning for Kamala and will probably be instrumental if she wins Pennsylvania, which James Carville famously described as Alabama, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between. I think it will be because of him, but he did come with liabilities. Walz doesn't appear to have any liabilities of any kind.
And maybe that's the most important thing. Let's not get bogged down with a distraction. So now to one of the subjects that you know inside and out, Donald Trump. We'll start with the easy stuff, which is him wanting to back out of the debate that was set with Kamala Harris, now wanting to change those rules to essentially do it over at Fox, but not under the same format. He wants a crowd. He wants his scene.
Not fair, Mark. I want to have people from Fox. I don't want people from ABC. I want people from Fox. It's pathetic.
One of the reasons that he was delayed the other day at that disastrous Black journalist conference was because they were going to fact check him in real time.
He complained that it was their incompetence dealing with the microphones, but that's not it. It was that he was refusing to go on stage because they were going to fact check him in real time, which of course that was a condition of the first debate, that there be no fact checking. And as a result, he told, I think the CNN fact checker Daily counted 33 just flat out lies that he told. But Donald, you'll notice, is not on the campaign trail. And in the 2016 campaign and the 2020 campaign, I wrote pieces pointing out Donald disappears from time to time. He has emotional ups and downs. So while Hillary Clinton worked herself to the point of exhaustion and collapsed briefly, Donald would be staying at home in his jammies and not going out at all. And there were no news articles about this. So the Harris Waltz campaign just put up on the internet her schedule for the next week, and next to it, Donald. So hers is just packed, and then there's one item in Montana for Donald.
Where is that? I've got to see that.
I just saw it on
X or something,
okay. Fox or MSNBC as I was.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we'll find it. All right, now I want to ask you about this. I thought of you immediately when this story hit, the $10 million in cash that was taken from an Egyptian bank. It was literally the cash was put into a bag. And then it was concurrently, or somewhat concurrently, there was a $10 million contribution from the Trump pockets into his campaign, but it was a loan to be reimbursed. I wonder if you could just speak to this whole thing. It was going to be an investigation. It was squashed by Bill Barr.
Right. Well, it was tamped down initially when Jeff Sessions was Trump's attorney general and then killed by Bill Barr on the theory, well, you're not going to be able to get a conviction, which seems very dubious. I just posted on my Facebook page, which is public. Anybody can go look at it. Facebook/David K, C-A-Y, David C-A-Y, that in 2017, very early in the Trump administration, I had a conversation with one of the highest ranking former military officers in the country, someone who is well known for his prudence and judgment and working in intelligence. And he told me that the U.S. government had irrefutable proof that there had been money from foreign governments put at Trump's disposal. And there was both Signet and HUMINT. Signet is signals intelligence, so money transfers you can track. You can track those. I once had the head of FinCEN, which is what looks for financial crimes, tell me that if someone made an $8.49 purchase in Malaysia that they needed to find, they'd find it if it was done with a credit card. He just needed enough computer power and time. Wow. And the other was human intelligence. And he told me that he couldn't give me any of the documents, but he was concerned that when the story got out, the Washington politics reporters wouldn't understand it. And he said to me, you should do everything you can to be ready to write about this the way you do in an authoritative way, because this will not take off because reporters won't understand it. Well, that's what's happened with Carol Leonig's Washington Post piece about the Egyptians and the $10 million. That story has all the earmarks of a thoroughly, thoroughly reported story that I suspect she's been working on for a very long time. And it's gone nowhere. There was a rewrite of it with some additional reporting in the New York Times, and the AP's done a little reporting on it, but it's just fallen by the wayside, which is exactly what this military officer was so worried about would happen, and thought that, and I asked, why me? Because, we don't know each other. And he simply said he had read a lot of my work over the years and thought that I would know how to make this an issue.
Well, there is something to this, David. It does have to be boiled down in a way that it's accessible to a lot of us who may not get the Washington Post, for example, or
right.
It has to be communicated. That is like one of your superpowers.
So one of the simple things here is this is just if you believe the Washington Post story, this is just a foreign government buying Donald Trump, paying $10 million to him, which is a crime for him to have accepted this. And the use of this mechanism they describe, the money went into Trump's pocket indirectly because he went to his pocket, but the route was you make a loan to the campaign, you get paid back by the campaign. That's how you get the money. And what troubled me the minute I read Carol's story, and I barely know Carol, but I know her a little bit, was that this officer had said to me there were multiple countries that had done this, that it was an enormous amount of money. And I have no doubt Donald would have no trouble taking money from the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Russians. Absolutely none. And we really need to have a serious inquiry into this. The statute of limitations may have run, but the Senate can undertake an investigation. The Senate's controlled by the Democrats. The House won't do this under any circumstances, no matter what happens. One of the Egyptians comes out tomorrow and says, yeah, I was the guy behind it and I did it. The Republicans won't investigate that. We need to have a serious investigation of this. And if it has to wait until next year and another Congress, so be it. But this should not be swept under the rugs. And Trump should be in the forefront, if he says it didn't happen, of saying, yeah, I want a complete and thorough investigation to clear my name.
Right. And David, I mean, you could easily just pull bank records at the time and show that it was never, I mean, were there
it wouldn't be easy. People would have moved. This was cash, literally cash. They went the Egyptian intelligence service people went to the Egyptian central bank and they took $10 million in $100 bills. Interesting little detail in the Post story, that was half of the Egyptian government's foreign reserves in U.S. dollars.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
$20 million for a government is just bupkis.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, right?
Right. You're talking there about nothing. I mean, a country of 80 million people, Egypt, it's just absolutely a nothing amount. But it is findable if they want to. But you would really get to this through other devices, I suspect, including witnesses, and that's where the power of the government to say, all right, Mr. Thompson, you can tell us the truth and we'll make an accommodation for you. And if not, we have enough stuff on you that whether or not we get Donald Trump, you're going to prison for 20 years. What do you want to do?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to see this story get out there more. You're the one who made this point months and months ago when we were first just beginning to talk about the documents at Mar-a-Lago and the thousands of documents and classified documents. He was waving them about, which seemed to be an ego play. But the question I remember asking you at the time was, why would he take so many of these documents? And I remember you said, with Donald, everything is transactional. Everything is for sale, in a sense.
Well,
and this really speaks to that.
I had a piece that ran at DC Report August 12th of 2022. Donald Trump has probably already sold national security secrets, something like that in the headline. So 2 years ago, as of next week, because Donald, in the documents he took, Donald doesn't know anything about geopolitics, nuclear weapons. He didn't take his daily briefing in many cases, which was really stripped down for him for his lack of knowledge. Remember, this is a man who didn't know why we have the USS Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor. I mean, what more do you need to know about his appalling level of ignorance? But Donald knows value, and he's very good at that. I mean, he knows how to look at a piece of real estate and say, nah, and another one and figure out how to make a lot of money off of it. And the documents he took are strongly suggestive of plans to sell them. And the special prosecutor's office, in several filings with Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida, described hypotheticals about why these documents matter that suggested Trump may have sold. Imagine if the president were to have sold these documents. Jack Smith's not the kind of person, nor is anybody in his team, is just going to make something out of whole cloth. They were sending a signal about what they could produce. Now, a lot of stuff we are never going to know in our lifetimes because we still have World War II national security secrets that are locked up. And I was told by somebody else the other day that, no, we have World War I secrets that are still locked up. My God, that's over 100 years ago. Everybody is dead. Everybody who was an adult at that time. We really need to fully know what went on here. And by the way, Donald sold the Washington, D.C. hotel that he got under the lease for it under these very dubious circumstances I wrote about in one of my Trump books for $325 million. And I pointed out at the time that was incredibly out of proportion to the revenues of the hotel. There was no way to justify that price. But Donald and his three older children got their money. The children each got a little slice, I think $5 million or so each. And remember, this is just for buying out a lease. This is not for the tangible property. And the company that bought it from him with borrowed money has now defaulted. The property is being repossessed or may have already been fully repossessed. And that just smells of a scheme to put money in Trump's pocket by people trying to curry favor with him. And at the end of the day, who is the loser in it? Well, the banks, but you and I. Those losses get absorbed through the economy. And
Wow.
there should be an investigation into the purchase price for that property and the subsequent collapse. The hotel, by the way, if you want to go there, is now a Hilton Waldorf Astoria, and you can stay there. Ah, there's the building. Leland Stanford, the famously corrupt California senator, was behind that project.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
In the
great
late
knowledge.
1800s.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do know that hotel became, along with his other properties, a way in which money could be funneled to Trump prior to any kind of major meeting or question about legislation that was pending.
Yes, and all the foreign governments who came, like the Saudis, rented out multiple floors. They paid the rack rate. So next time you stay in a hotel, look on the door when you entered the room, and you may pay $129, but it'll say the maximum rate for this room is, and there'll be a big number. I mean, sometimes $500-$600. And they always paid the highest rate.
Well, the thing that he continues to do is to force the Secret Service to also pay that rack rate. So he's charging the government now while he's getting Secret Service protection. And then the other thing, I remember reading this a few years ago when he was, in power, the Secret Service has to cover him regardless of where he goes. And sometimes he'd say, I'm not sure if I'm going to go to Bedminster or I'm going to go to Mar-a-Lago. And they have to book rooms in both places. So there were multiple rooms at that rack rate. I mean, David, you realize that the guy had, was with both hands pulling money out of the taxpayer.
Yeah. And that's because Donald really never has been a billionaire. I've had two brand name billionaires tell me that I asked them, how much would it cost to pose as you? And both of them said the number I had in my head. We were all in agreement, $20 million of spending. Well, Donald Trump's got $20 million a year to spend. See, he's not a poor man. I don't want to create that impression. But he's not a billionaire. He never has been a billionaire. And he's not a businessman. A businessman or a businesswoman starts an enterprise to create wealth. Donald is a cash extractor. Take this over, suck the money out of it. He's like an ongoing mafia bust out.
Yeah, right. And I just want to ask about the, quote, legitimate business, which is this Trump Media and Technology Corporation, which is, we ran the piece of, I think that recorded piece with Barry Diller talking about the fact that he says it's a scam. It's ridiculous. Don't even insult me with a question as to, how it's going to do or what,
Hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, millions of dollars of losses, and it's valued in billions of dollars. I mean, you got to be on drugs to think that has any sense.
So his freeze-out date is, I think, approaching in September, though, David. Yeah. How do you handicap
selling shares? If he does sell any shares, you should expect the price to drop. If he does not get back to the White House, you should expect it to fall like a rock out of an airplane on November 6th. Because I think they're going to fight any vote result that doesn't put Donald in the White House. It might be a little bit longer than that until that's all sorted out. But there's no business there. This is a scam, top to bottom. There was a guy who I saved his Twitter name who bragged about how he put his entire life savings into this stock because he wanted to show his loyalty and his fealty to Donald Trump. And when he gets wiped out, I'm going to go try and get him to talk for an interview to see what he says.
Well, that's the thing that it's got is this, and it's the one thing that is so odd. It's that members of the cult can express their cultishness and express their fealty and express their enthusiasm by throwing money at this thing. And apparently that's enough to sustain it.
It is. People who don't understand, the basics of the market, you try to buy a stock that's going to be profitable for a long, long time, what the company is, and you just hold on to it. And, as Warren Buffett says, most people should just buy the Vanguard 500 or its equivalent at other places like Fidelity and just leave it there. And that's exactly right. If I was just counseling one of my grandsons who's working now that he's graduated from college for a year before he goes back to graduate school. I said, you put all your money into a mutual stock fund. He said, well, do I need to buy bonds? And I said, why? You're not going to touch the money for 30 or 40 years. Certainly more than 40 years. I said, when you get 5 years from retirement, then start looking at bonds.
Yeah, yeah. These are wild times, and just because you've mentioned the market, and I'll let you go, but I wonder if you can just give me your thoughts. I mean, really, you have not only the decades of knowledge in finance and this sort of thing, but you also have a sense of the American body politic and those who are involved in the market being reflexive and panicky, and the media feeds that panic. So we had a sell-off. It was at 1,100. The Dow was down 1,100 at one point yesterday. Today is the rebound day, of course. Give me some thoughts on what's happening.
Well, roughly every 2 or 3 years, the market has a dip like we're seeing now, and it may resume in a day or two. Every 8 or 10 years, the market will fall a third or more. If you sold at the bottom of the market in 2008, you're in real trouble today, because when you bought back, it was much more expensive. On the other hand, if you had cash and you bought at the bottom of the market in March of 2008, you've done really well since then. And markets don't go up in a straight line. They go up and down, but the overall trend is like looking at the High Sierra. There are peaks and valleys, but eventually you get all the way up there to Lake Tahoe and the Mount McKinley. Not that they're near each other. And
right. Not yet.
But if you own stocks, just don't do anything. Just sit there. Yeah,
it's hard not to, because the headlines are coming at you every day. But that
the
is the best advice.
One thing I do encourage people to do is this. You should have enough of, if you're like me and you have to make RMDs, required minimum distributions, in your retirement account, you should have enough money for 3 years of RMDs in bonds or cash. Because if you have to sell stocks and the market's down to make your RMD, it really hurts you. You can sell bonds when the market's down, and when it's coming back up, you can then sell some of your stocks when it's back up and buy more bonds. So we put aside enough money every year by the end of the year for the next year, so we know even if the market falls right after the first of the year sharply, we've already put the money aside, because it depends on the value of your investments on December 31st, or if that's a weekend day, the day before it. And that's the one piece to do. And if you got 3 years, you can go without selling stocks. Don't worry about this. Just sit there. And the long-term return for my Vanguard 500 is over 10%. Your money doubles every 7 years if it just sits there.
Now, that's such a great note. And it's funny, the other thing that impinge often on prosperity are things going on around the world. The Middle East is quite unstable at the moment, but it has been historically as well. So these are things that you can, I think, overreact to, but probably the best advice is the advice that you're giving us. People are saying there's an argument in the chat about it being a recession, but it really isn't a recession.
There's no recession going on.
Yeah.
The interest rate, first of all, the inflation rate we have right now is below the average since World War II. In the late 70s and early 80s, we had an inflation rate in double digits. The peak was about 14%. We're talking about 3% inflation. I had mortgages on my homes from 1971, when I was 22 years old and bought my first house, until into this century. And my average mortgage rate was close to 7%, because and I got the best rates. Those were the normal rates at that time. So people have just been lulled into a misunderstanding of economics. The sort of natural rate of return, Adam Smith and others have argued, Adam Smith, of course, in the 18th century, is around 5%. And inflation affects people differently. If you're low income and you spend a lot more of your total budget on food and gas to get to work, you're being hurt more than somebody like me. And we need to take that into account, but we do not have high inflation, and a whole bunch of products have come down in price. in the last few years. Eggs are lower than when Trump left office, for example. There were 2 spikes in the egg business, but they've come down. And you want lower prices, folks? Demand that your legislators do what the woman at the FTC is trying to do. Demand competition. We call it antitrust law. It really should be the laws requiring businesses to compete. No monopolies unless they're highly regulated, and generally they should be run by cooperatives or the local government, like electricity distribution. Lots of competition. That's what drives down prices. And by the way, at the same time it drives down prices, it creates more jobs.
By the way, here on that, one of the things that I just lament is the sad way we've let these mergers and acquisitions run amok, and we, the consumer, and it's not just consumer, other businesses as well,
but
pay a huge price for it.
Your business radio is one of the very best examples of this. For a long time, we had a rule that a single company could own 7 TV stations, 7 FM radio stations, and 7 AM stations. And then Congress got rid of this, led by the Republicans. A lot of Democrats voted for it, but it was a Republican initiative to do so. And now we have, a handful of owners who own hundreds of TV stations. Sinclair, Gray, Tigna, which was the old TV stations owned by Gannett. And we don't have the competition that we had. And it's just terrible for business, for advertisers, and for consumers. Competition is a good thing. Monopoly, bad thing. It's that simple. You want to make it simple? Monopoly, bad. Oligopoly, bad. Competition, good.
Pick up any one of David's books and you'll find a bunch of interesting stuff in there. The Big Cheat really is it's a delicious read just to see what we all know, which is the way in which Donald Trump and his cronies ripped off so much of us as taxpayers during the last administration. The Big Cheat, how Donald Trump fleeced America and enriched himself and his family. David K. Johnston. But we love your musings and reflections on anything here, David. Couldn't Jack Smith press Meadows for intel on the $10 million? Is no contender.
Well, I don't know if Meadows would know about it, but I think we need to have a serious inquiry into this story by the Post. And if my source was telling the truth, which I believe he was, in 2017, our government has known there was something here for a long time. Okay, Trump was in charge. His minions shut it down. What's to explain the Biden administration not getting on this at the end of January 2021? Merrick Garland is a very decent man. He was an excellent judge, but he's a Boy Scout. And
he's playing, I don't know, he's playing wiffle ball in a hardball game.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. He's playing wiffle ball in a hardball game.
All right, Dave. All right. We'll talk to you next week, and thanks so much. The great David K. Johnston, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.